Good morning. So, today in Principles of Management, we are going to learn a very important aspect in management organization is that communication. Communication in an organization is a very vital part because without communication, you will not let anything uh, happen. It will just not happen because without communication you will not be able to direct, you will not be able to organize, you will not be able to plan and implement things that has to be done to obtain a particular objective. So you need to have a certain set of communication system. So in an organization or an institute, the kind of communication we follow is a more like a formal communication. You know, there are certain structures and certain ways of approaching to those to your colleagues, or your subordinates or your senior. There will be certain structure, certain pattern, right? So we are going to learn about that in this lecture. Now, the learning outcome of this lecture will be that you will be able to explain the importance of good communication in an organization, difference between formal communication and informal communication, and clarify the various forms of communication and evaluate the steps of overcoming the barriers of communications. Okay, so let's start the lecture. Um, what is a communication? It's a process by which activities of a society or are collected and coordinated to to reach the goal of a individual and the collective group. Okay, so the subfield of general communication studies and is often a component to effective management in a workplace environment. So organizational communication is basically organizational communication flows through its structure and the effects. So behavior of human relations and performance are depending on the this organizational communication. So according to Lewitt, there are many reasons why a manager communicate. A manager's motive to inform, control, and fulfill social needs are only obtained through communication. So, communication is used to influence employees to achieve organizational goals. Communication information provides facts and data to be used in making communication, in making decisions, and towards achieving the objective that may set standards. Okay, so communication is used to coordinate employees and tasks. So managers also communicate in order to fulfill social needs through interaction that does not involve work. So, for example, an employee is not only required to talk on matter related to their jobs but also on matters related to sports, weather, entertainment, politics, and other fields of or other fields of occupations for that sake. So even though this communication will not have a direct effect on his work or performance uh, in an organization, it can influence the way employee feels about his workplace and his relationship with other employees. Okay, so according to Rue, a study found that about 50 to 90% of the times a manager is used to communicate uh, you know, uh, um, are they communicate on. And unfortunately, according to another study, there are seen that in 70% of the business communication fails to achieve objective desire. So this show so lower level managers spend 57% of their time communicating with their middle managers, and it is 60% and for the upper manager and 78% for the top management that they communicate with. Okay, so by definition, let's understand what is communication. Communication is the process of transferring information and knowledge of one individual or party to another person or party using meaningful symbols. Is a method of extracting and sharing ideas, attitudes, values, opinions, and informations. Okay, so communication is a process of transferring information, knowledge from one individual one group to another using meaningful symbols or yeah, meaningful symbols that is a method of exchanging or sharing ideas, values, opinions, and other pieces of information. The process of communication begins with the sender who wishes to deliver a particular message, and the process is completed when the receiver of the message provides with the feedback whether the message received is understood or not. Below, it is said that the communication process begins with the sender who sends the message, and uh, at the end of the receiver when it is completed once he provides the sender a feedback. Okay, so that completes the entire process of what do you call communication. Uh, just hold on, I'll just get back to you. Yeah, right. So that becomes the entire process of communication. So it starts with sending or encoding the messages. The sender encodes a message in a way like I am a sender, I am a message sending, I want to send a message, so I have to write it in a language which is understood by the receiver, right? So encoding means writing or framing your information in a set of symbols that could be understood by the receiver, right? Like I'm speaking in English, or you can say it in Hindi also, but provided the receiver is also understanding it, okay, or can decipher, decode it. Okay, so encoding is when you are putting it into a understandable language or symbols that by you, and then taking up a medium, that is channel, and then it is transferred to this receiver decodes it and tries to assimilate the information and gives the feedback to the sender. Based on the feedback, the sender understands whether the receiver have understood the message or not. Okay, right? Now, communication is a process where exchange of information takes place between two or more people. The elements of communication are process are also, like information sender, also known as the message source. The sender is a person who has a piece of information and wishes to deliver that to another person or a party. So decoding is encoding is takes place when the sender translates the information into that to be delivered in a series of symbols. It can be, body language also. It can be written words. It can be verbal words, right? So when you are, arranging it into a symbols that it can be identified and understood by the receiver. So message, message comprises the symbols and the form of verbal and or written sign language that symbolizes the information to be delivered by the sender to the receiver. Channel is the mode or method of delivering, the information to another person, and the channel may or must suit the message to be delivered to ensure the communication process is occurs smoothly, effectively, and efficiently. Okay, so a channel is the mode or method of delivering the information to the receiver. Okay, and it is, we can use emails, we can use letters like postal letters, we can use video conferencing, we can use telephonic conference, conversation, we can use one to one, person to person, face to face conversation. So all these methods or mediums are medium of or channel of communicating the information to another person. Decoding is the process where the receiver translates a message received into a form that can be understood and bring meaning to the receiver. Right. The receiver is the individual or the party who receives the message delivered by the sender. The message form is based on the background of the receiver. Now, feedback is referred to the reaction of the receiver towards the message received from the sender. Now, this process is returning the message to the sender that depicts the level of understanding. So feedback is the process of, it is a reverse process of sending the message back to the sender, that depicts the understanding of the received message towards a particular information. Now, providing the feedback is the best way of showing that the particular message has been received and whether the message has been understood or not. Okay, so description or noise. So disruption and noise are the factors that disrupt, confuses, and restrict the delivery of information or message is considered as a noise or disruption. Now, interference may be internal or external. The internal factors are related to individual, that oneself, himself, as such as the receiver who does not pay attention to the message delivered will not understand the message. Meanwhile, the external factors are environmental and physical factors that causes message delivered not to be perfectly understood by the receiver. uh, the internal factors can be, a person not paying attention, or person maybe not understanding the language or cannot decode it. uh, the person may be prejudiced towards a particular thing that has been communicated to that, will also be a internal factor of a person not receiving the message. Okay, like for example, if I say you must eat um, fish and eggs on a daily basis, if I talk this information, if I give this information to a vegetarian, maybe that vegetarian is because of a cultural or a religious factors determining that person being a vegetarian in nature. So that person will not receive it, and when it gives a feedback, it will say why to eat it when we can get the same thing from another person. It will not understand the other aspect that I may associate with, making one person to eat a non-veg based food. All right, so it is a personal internal, self environment that it, obstruct the receiving of the message properly. The external factors are, it can be, there can be loud noise, there can be disturbances that can physically interrupt the flow of information. Now, communication of a manager in an organizations are, a person has to be in, interpersonal role. Why communication is important for a manager in an organization? For an interpersonal role, if interpersonal role is because he's a figurehead, he's a manager, and he has to develop a relationship between his subordinates and his colleagues. So an interpersonal role communication plays an interpersonal role in a manager, or for a manager in an organization. Similarly, information role, that is monitoring, disseminator of information, and speaker, that is informal, way of roles of person. Yeah, so a person can monitor, ask somebody to, to see that another person is doing, or how he's performing. So for that also you require a communication skill. So it is for monitoring, disseminating certain information that has been received by the top level managers, for example. And he has to be a good orator, like we have learned that how a, manager or a leader should be. That person has to be an orator, or speaking out and conveying messages and motivating the employees, subordinates, and fellow members. So it will have a speaker. Being an orator, you need to have a good communication skills. So the role of a decision, how the managers will take up decisions in an organization. Like he is an entrepreneur, he will encourage new ideas and innovations, will require a communication skill. Problem solving activities will require a communication skill. Appropriation of work, and identifying the role of the person is a is part of decision making, whether you are going to perform in good in the organization or not. Then he, for negotiation for any activity and work, you need to have a good communication skills. The exchange of information and the influence the organization's member, because there is any involvement between one and another manager and employees information in the organization. So from the top management, middle management, and first line managers, you have the number of decisions that are taken are lesser and lesser. The topmost managers takes the more maximum number of decisions, the middle management takes moderate number of decisions, and the lower level of management takes minimum level of decisions. So as we go from top to bottom, the number of, the frequency of information flowing will also be narrowing down. The communication process is that the sender communicates transmission, receives a receiver, and the barrier to it is the process such as the sender uh, barriers, and in encoding barriers, then message barriers, medium of barriers, decoding or coding barriers, receiver barriers, and feedback barriers are various types of barriers that can come across. Then you have personal barriers and physical barriers and semantic barriers of understanding that can turn out to be a hindrance in a communication process. The style of communication and in an organization is very influenced by the personal style of communication. That is, whether you have an assertive style of communication, or aggressive style of communication, or non-assertive style of communication. So there are different style of communication apart from a formal and non-formal style of communication. Organizational communication, that is the compounded interpersonal communication process across an organization. So communication flow is an organization, like formal communication in vertical or horizontal communication. So a vertical communication will be from bottom to top or top to bottom. Horizontal communication is from bottom to the the to another department, or to another segment, are called horizontal communication. When you're talking among your friends and colleagues in the organization, that is a horizontal communication. Informal communication on grapevine or directional communication is a another way of communication. The formal communication through official designated channel, of message flow between organization position and official information exchange, usually found in an organization with chart and policy manual or a hierarchical structure. Okay. So, informal communication, that is episodes of interaction that does not affect official designated channel of communication or inherent and even necessary aspects of organizational life. So, procreates it. The pros in that is that it creates a relaxed and comfortable atmosphere in way of communication. So, formal communication, if you see here in the um, image, it is said that a person is trying to present. So on a podium, the person is standing and representing whatever the information that person has to give it to his top management and colleague members of that organization. Similarly, informal communication is like when you are talking with your friends and colleagues in the organization. It basically, it is has a better, the benefit of this is it creates a relaxed and a comfortable climate in the work scenario. um, Also helps you relax under the high pressure work or steer pressures. The formal communication is either upward or downward. It is the this is These are the vertical communication. This is the in a diagonal communication, like from downward to going up to another department of communication is diagonal communication, and horizontal or lateral communication is from one center to another center or among the same level of employees. When you exchange communication is a horizontal communication. Taking up upward communication, according to Betrol and Martin, upward communication is the vertical communication flow from lower level to more higher level in the organization. If you see employee workers to supervisors of that organization, then departmental head, then assistant general manager, then manager, and then managing director will receive the information. This is a structure I'm talking about in an organization, that the information is flowing from bottom to top. Suppose a worker has some complaint regarding some uh, equipments or machinery in the production line. So he will inform it to the supervisor. Supervisor will inform it to the departmental head. Departmental head will make a report and inform it to the assistant general. And if this case is very high, that this will go again to the general managers, and this general manager will communicate this information to the managing director. Then again, we are coming to a downward communication. This general manager will take up a decision and transfer it. Ki, okay, we will change that equipment or exchange that equipment with a new technology. So this general manager has informed this thing to the assistant manager, and this assistant manager will inform it to the departmental head, and departmental head will inform it to the supervisor, and supervisor will inform it to the worker that from next word we are not going to use this equipment, we are completely changing the technology for doing this set of work. That is received to the bottommost uh, uh, worker, right? So according to Petrol, downward communication is a vertical communication which streams a style in as an increased level to help more than one chipper level within the organization. So then Horizontal level of communication is um, involves colleagues and peers at the same level of the organization communicating with each other. Okay, so here this is a diagram showing a, communication, horizontal communication that is happening. Like production managers and purchase managers, HR, account officer, public relation officer, marketing manager, they are communicating among each other, and they can communicate one by one, and they can communicate all together. They are all part of horizontal communication because they are talking at the same level of the in the organization. Horizontal communication, that is, the purpose is that the main purpose is to orient the activities of various departments and division of the organization. And vertical communication, the main purpose is to provide order, instruction, device, feedback, opinion, suggestions, and request within the subordinates and the superior. uh, so horizontal communication in form of formal flow. Informal messages are flow between same level of and status of people. And in whereas in vertical communication, informal information and messages flow between subordinates and the superior. So media, what are the media that is taken? Generally horizontal communication is an oral communication, and vertical communication is generally written communication. Distortion is that the free distortion of messages can be there, and possibly many possibilities of distortion of messages are there. The main information in the relationship is that to maintain the formality horizontal communication is to maintain an informal relationship, whereas in vertical it is maintains a formal relationship. The length of the information here in horizontal communication is the length of information flown between sender and receiver is very short, and whereas a vertical communication, the length of the information flow between the sender and receiver is long. The method of communication is that communication is mostly done through oral media, and it is more used as a horizontal way of communication. Just hold on. Now, types of communication in an organization. The communication is very important in order to ensure that the message to be delivered reaches the receiver. That is, it shows three types of communication used in an organization: formal communication, informal communication, and non-verbal communication. Um, like vertical communication we have, formal communication we have vertical, horizontal, and diagonal. Informal communication is like when you are having, and it is more like an oral communication. Non-verbal communication is when we are using para languages and kinesis. Okay. Okay, let me explain one thing here. Para languages are like when you are using sign languages, okay, and using some props to explain your words or your ideas. And kindness is when you're through your body movement, through your facial expressions, you are trying to explain something, is called kindnesses. Like, when you're raising your eyebrows, that means like this, you are saying ki, Are, there's something to be kept keeping a focus on. Like, it can narrowing your eyebrows with the anger in your eyes can show that you are not pleased with the results. Or, you know making smiling at somebody is also a kindness, is like you are showing that you're pleased with it, right? Similarly, a para languages, like you are putting your fingers and asking somebody to look there, that is para languages. You are using your body language, or your some part or some prop to direct you towards information. Increasing communication effectiveness is that the step to informing and effective communication is to identify and overcome barrier in communication process. These barriers will interfere with the message to be delivered to the receivers. Now, communication barriers have five barriers in communication as depicted here in the figure. So it has selective perception, disruption, emotions, communication skills, and suspicion. So communication barriers have five depicts, that is when you are selective in perceiving the information, when there is some destruction or obstruction coming in receiving of the information, when you have emotions involved in the process, and communication when you have lack of communication skills, understanding of the language, and suspicion when you have doubt about the message that had been conveyed, are one of the barriers of communication. The selective perception is the tendency to listen and receive objects and information which are considered with a with our values, beliefs, and desires, but disagrees or reject information consistent with them, which is not inconsistent with them. So perception is a process where by an individual receives, arrange, interprets, and sorts information obtained from their environment. This information by the process of perception, filtering of perception involves difference in personality, psychology, or basic experience that influence other people to discharge or not give attention to certain stimuli. Individuals are also inclined to fill in the blanks of missing information by assuming that he does not know is consistent with the already known information. Disruption is any factor that interrupts or confuses or restrict communication. For example, a person talking on a telephone in a noisy environment with faces difficulty in understanding the sender, what the sender is saying, right? So the disturbance, disruption might result into wrong interpretation towards the message that had been delivered. Emotions, the reaction, emotional reactions such as anger, love, jealousy, or fear will influence the person in understanding the message being sent to the person. So emotions are subjective reaction when a person communicates. So the emotion and the sentiments of a sender influences the message encoded and received may or may not realize emotional conditions of the sender. So the emotion of the sender and the receiver will influence the coding and reaction of the receivers. Communication skills is like skills to communicate differs from an individual to another individual, and the difference are actually by culture, education, training, personality, are certain particular is peculiar to a particular person. So for example, an American prefer uh, uh, you know uh, and are more talkative. Like it is said that Americans are talkative compared to Japanese. So they are more, they use less verbal communication and rather than, and they use more kindnesses and para languages to perform a task or to give a message. Whereas Americans, they use a lot of words and oral communication to send a message. So the Japanese people prefers to wait, listen, and discuss a matter in detail before making any decision. The effectiveness of communication also depends on the time a message is delivered. For instance, if a messenger decides to give out an instruction or message during the festive season or in an evening when an employee is preparing to leave for the leave the workplace or thinking of taking a long vacation, the effectiveness of a communication will definitely be poor. Why? Because the person will be preoccupied and distracted by what he has to do in further coming time. So the suspicion, and when we are talking about suspicion, the reliability of particular message will affect the effectiveness of the message. Um, like for instances, in this COVID situation only, you see, when initially it was said that please all of you take the vaccination, very few people turn out to take vaccination at the first go because they were skeptical, they were suspicious whether the vaccine, so how could vaccine be developed in such a short period of time, and whether it is going to be effective or not. So that suspicion, that whether this message is right or not, made people, it was difficult to accept that and message being accepted. So, for example, in a discussion between employees and the management, the employees are frequently suspicious about the claims of the manager. In this situation, the suspicion towards nature or honesty of the sender is more important. So, education and experience of a person on the subject of communication will also affect the process of communication. So, another important factor is the closeness of receiver to the sender. A good relationship between two parties will promote a better and more effective communication between one another compared to individuals who are on a dispute all the time, right? So the measures to overcome communication barriers, what are the measures we can see? We can control the flow of information, encourage the feedback, language use can be of a common ground, listen actively, control negative emotions, use non-verbal signs, and using the grapevine and communication channel as a communication channel are one of the effective ways of cutting down the barriers of communication. So controlling the flow of information, there are times when manager receives too much information that may not be relevant or important to him. Therefore, the manager must create a system that is able to identify and give priority only to the important message that is required to intimidate attention. Now, encouraging feedback, the manager are related parties to take measures to determine whether the message has been understood accurately. From the feedback receiver, the sender is able to find out whether the message delivered had reached its target. Language use, since language can become a barrier to communication, and managers needs to properly choose words and language that can easily be understood by the subordinates. For example, the use of technical language is only suitable for expert in a particular area. The activity listening, that is active listening, is that manager assumes that part of responsibility to the communicating successful is by giving a non punishing feedback or asking employees for a feedback. Means that the manager is clearly listening to what is being told. Subordinate must act as good listener and receive the information. They need to listen actively and reduce the interference and develop better communication skills through role playing and group presentation training. Controlling negative emotions. Like everybody else, a manager needs to control his negative emotions when communicating, because negative emotions can alter or afflict the content of particular message. Using non-verbal signs, the messages needs to use non-verbal signs in emphasizing important parts in particular message in order to portray their feelings. Like vocal cues. How if I say hello, that means I may be angry. Or if I say hello, it means I'm very pleased. Okay, so these vocal cues are also non-verbal signs of understanding whether the message which is being transferred is of which emotions. So using grapevine as a communication channel, the grapevine is a communication channel that is difficult to be removed from any organization. Therefore, a manager must be able to use this channel to deliver information promptly, examine reaction before making any final decisions, and getting a feedback in a very easy manner. Grapevine is an informal network of information among employees. Uh, the grapevine in an organization does not exist, or emphasize power and rank. Okay, so the grapevine may connect members of organization in an direction of communication, either vertical, horizontal, or diagonal. Even though grapevine can be defined as rumors, they are also used for to useful to management. Through grapevine, management is able to deliver information and receive feedback faster without involving a high cost mode of communication. And based on the feedback, management can evaluate whether to carry out further investigation onto a matter at the hand or not. Okay, so grapevine in an informal vehicle through which message flow throughout the organization. So one is a gossip chain and another one is cluster chain, are a type of grapevine which can be followed in an organization. Barriers to organizational communication we have talked about, and we can come to a conclusion that there are 7 C's of effective communication. That is credibility, courtesy, clarity, correctness, consistency, then concertness and consciousness into the communication field. So, at the end, I would like to conclude that a communication is an integral part of an organization or an institution to attain their objective in a very smooth manner. So, a great English scholar had said uh, that a single biggest problem is communication in is the illusion that it makes it has taken place. Sir John Bernard Shaw has said that the single biggest problem in a communication is the illusion that it has taken place. That means he wanted to say, if even if you have said something, it is an illusion that you have communicated, until unless you do not get a proper feedback from the receiver. Okay, so we are concluding this chapter, and now I would like all of you to go to your LMS and take the quiz.